Late last night, we learned that Wyoming Republican Party voted over the weekend to cast their Congresswoman Liz Cheney out entirely for criticizing the former president. They'll no longer recognize her as a member of the GOP. That's after House Republicans in Washington earlier this year removed her from leadership, obviously, for doing the same. Late today, both Wyoming's two Republican senators declined to support Cheney when asked. House Democrats are expected to launch censure proceedings against Congressman Gosar tomorrow. Congresswoman Cheney today calling House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy's inaction on Gosar, quote, indefensible. As you know, when asked by CNN yesterday, McCarthy said he had called Gosar, and afterwards Gosar removed the post. He had this to say off camera.
He didn't see it before it posted and took it down. Okay. So it was not his intent to ever show any harm.
Congressman McCarthy added, quote, what I said to conference was we cannot accept any action or showing of violence to another member. That's more than a week after the clip went up. Fellow Republican Adam Kinzinger saying he'll vote tomorrow to censure Gosar, but he's certainly in a pretty lonely minority. More typical is the House Freedom Caucus choosing a new leader, Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry, who's come under scrutiny for his role in seeking to overturn the election. Some headlines: Pennsylvania lawmaker played key role in Trump's plot to oust acting attorney general. PA Congressman Scott Perry acknowledges introducing Trump to lawyer at the center of election plot. Pennsylvania Congressman aided Trump effort to flip Justice Department on big lie. Now it seems he is being rewarded for it. We learned as well today that the woman the former president endorsed to run elections in Michigan spread false election claims and conspiracy theories about January 6. His endorsement on her site reads in part, good luck, Christina, and while you're at it, check out the fake election results that took place in the city of Detroit. Just for the record, there was no evidence of any widespread fraud in the election. But believing such things has become a price of admission for remaining in President Trump's good graces, as has downplaying the violence we saw at the Capitol. It's gotten so bad for some Republicans that simply voting for a bipartisan bill on roads and bridges has earned them death threats, as well as efforts by fellow party members to strip them of committee assignments. That, too, is to curry favor with the former president who opposed the bill. Yet the irony is that loyalty only seems to run one way. In his new book, ABC's Jonathan Karl writes about a conversation the former president allegedly had in his final day as president with Republican Party Chair Ronna McDaniel. Quoting now, I'm done, Trump told McDaniel, I'm starting my own party. You cannot do that, McDaniel told Trump. If you do, we will lose forever. Quote, exactly, you lose forever without me, Trump responded, I don't care. Joining us now, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, author of Republican Rescue, Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks you very much. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
The book is about, as you say, rescuing the Republican Party. Do you believe Donald Trump really cares about the Republican Party?
Well, the book's not about him, Anderson. It's about talking to our voters all across the country and saying to them, how are we going to win again? In 2018 to 2020, in 2 years, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. The only other time in the 150-plus year history of the Republican Party that happened was Herbert Hoover, from 30 to 32. And then we didn't win the White House again 28 of the next 36 years. We have to have a viable two-party system in this country. We have to be able to contrast different ideas, give voters choices. And to do that, we have to once again become the party of truth.
The problem, though, is the former president, who is the head of the Republican Party now on a national level, I mean, he is a truth denier. I mean, he's one of the people in the title of your book, and yet your party is beholden to him.
Well, look, I think there's some things you're seeing now which show that that's becoming less so. Yesterday, there was a new poll from the Des Moines Register of Iowa Republicans, and as I know you know, those are some of the most conservative Republicans in America, in Iowa. They asked the question, where's your first loyalty, to the Republican Party or to Donald Trump? 62% said the Republican Party, 26% said Donald Trump. And I think we're in an instant gratification society, Anderson. Donald Trump dominated the political world in this country, and around the world for that matter, for 5 years. He's been gone now not quite 10 months out of office, and we expect everything to be changed. I think that people have to start to speak out about the truth, which is what I try to do in the book.
But other than, I mean, you're speaking out, but there's not a lot of other people out there. I mean, it's pretty lonely. We see what's happening to Liz Cheney. Adam Kinzinger as well has now said he's not going to run again.
I think it's a little different with me because I was, for people who say they support Donald Trump, they have to line up behind me. You remember I was the first one to endorse him in February of 2016 after I dropped out of the race.
Yeah.
Chaired his transition, was offered Chief of Staff, was offered Secretary of Labor, was offered Homeland Security Secretary. A lot of things. I didn't take them, but I was offered them and helped prepare for both sets of debates.
Do you regret that support?
I don't, because as I said to the British ambassador one day, Anderson, the way America works is you don't always get to vote for who you want to. You get to vote for who's left in our system. So in 2016, I ran against him. I wasn't successful.
2016, you said there's no one who's better prepared to provide America with the strong leadership that it needs, both at home and around the world, than Donald Trump. In your RNC speech, you said we are about to be led by not only a strong leader, but by a caring, genuine, and decent person. Do you believe that now?
Well, look, I think what I said there, I absolutely believe that he was our strongest option that was left when I said those things. And the fact is that, again, you're left with the choices you have. But now what I'm saying to folks...
Do you believe that he was caring, genuine, and a decent person?
Let me tell you something. When I said those things, he had always been that to me. Mm-hmm. He had always been that to me at that time.
Do you believe that now?
Well, he's been less of that to me over the course of time, but I still consider him a friend. We've been friends for 20 years.
Do you think he has been decent? Do you think he's been genuine, caring? I mean,
I think it's
when you were in the hospital, he called you up and he was saying something about like, you're not going to say you got it from me, are you?
Right, but in the beginning of that conversation, for the whole conversation, he did ask how I was doing. But the fact is, Anderson, that where he has fallen down, in my view, most starkly, and the part that I emphasize in the book the most, is from election night forward. And I said on television that night, right after his speech, that you can't stand behind the seal of the president in the East Room of the White House and tell the American people the election was stolen when you have no evidence to prove that it was.
But you won't say that that person should never be able to stand behind the podium in the White House again.
Because it's not my choice whether he stands behind it. And I've learned over time that all you can do is do what you do. And what I'm doing now...
But you would have the choice of voting for him or not, and you won't say, or would you say,
because I don't know what my alternatives will be, Anderson. So it's bad at this point and wrong to get into speculation about that. Because all
it's
that
not a lot of spegiven. I mean, there's a good chance he's going to run, and obviously
I'm not so sure of that. And
everybody has to make a choice, and given who else there may be, you know what he is. Well, and you think he's still capable of being president?
I don't know who else will be my choice. Mm-hmm. And I think until you know that, it's irresponsible to say who you would pick or who you wouldn't pick.
But you don't think supporting the attack on the Capitol, fomenting the insurrection, is a disqualifier?
What I said in the book was that he has to take responsibility for that. And I believe everybody should have an opportunity to change their minds and to apologize for things that they did wrong.
But he's not going to apologize.
Well, I don't know that. I can't predict what he'll do, but what I'm doing is laying out for people very clearly.
Has he ever apologized for anything?
Yes. I remember him apologizing for the statements he made on the Mexican judge during the primary. So that's one instance that I can remember right off the top of my head. But what's much more important to me is that our voters, our citizens, have to look at what the facts were. And the way I tried to write this book regarding not only the election, but a number of these other conspiracy and truth-denying things like QAnon or Pizzagate or birtherism, was to approach it like a prosecutor and say, listen, everybody, here's the allegation. Here are all the facts.
But all of
Here's
those
my
things,
conclusion.
But then again, all of those are things the president has either been himself a birther, a truth denier. He's certainly, played coy with QAnon at the very least. He's been openly encouraged.
And I lay out that case in the book.
Yeah.
Like, look, what I'm trying to do, Anderson, is, and this is kind of like the wrong way some people have approached the vaccine issue, in my view. They try to tell people, this is it. You must do this. What I'm saying is you need to educate people. You need to educate them, not indoctrinate them. So what I try to do in the book is to lay out for people in a very plain-spoken, factual way why, I saw his statement when in your lead where he said about the erroneous or fake results in Detroit. Well, I lay out in the book very specifically that he actually did better in Detroit in 2020 than he did in 2016. And Joe Biden actually did worse than Hillary Clinton did. That's a very ineffective theft. If you're going to let the other guy do better and you do worse.
There are a lot of Republicans who did very well in the election down ballot, just he didn't.
By the way, that's also in the book as well, but I'm talking about Detroit in particular.
Right. The thing is, though, the Republican, I agree with you as a citizen, stepping aside as a reporter, as a citizen, I want there to be two strong, viable parties that have different perspectives and battle it out, but that have a basic agreement of what is truth and what is not. And the Republican Party today seems to have given up on that largely. I mean, you look at what's happening in Congress, these people are terrified of him.
Well, look, I think also that there have been times when we could say the same thing about the Democratic Party. And what changes that? Leaders come forward and say, no, here's the better way. And what I'm saying in this book, and I've been saying in a speech that the president critiqued at the Republican Jewish Coalition last weekend or at the Reagan Library in September, is that we have to be the party now that's talking about tomorrow and not about yesterday, because grievance politics, vendetta politics about an election that is long over now is not the way to show you're a leader. And I want to show our party there is a way to do this. And by the way, Glenn Youngkin and Jack Ciattarelli did it. They were Glenn was rewarded with a victory, and Jack closed a 15-point lead to 2.5 points by talking about tomorrow, and he won seats in the New Jersey legislature.